Hi sophomores, welcome to your Illustrator lesson and also the lesson on how to make your name banner. So let's start with getting Illustrator open. I've already done that, so I'm going to hit Create New. And if you notice, in your activity prompt for your banner, there are specific units that we want in specific width and height. So I'm going to start with changing the name. So the first thing the activity prompt tells me to do is to rename this. So I'm going to name it Nanoska_banner. So that's the first thing. The next thing is to change my units. So my units are going to be pixels. And I want a width of 800 and a height of 200. And it automatically changed my orientation, which is what I wanted it to do. And everything else looks good to go. So I'm going to say create. So this is going to show up. So next I'm going to hit view. And I am going to look for show transparency grid. And why we're doing this, it's so that we can see what our actual banner is going to look like. Our banner is not going to have a background. Here's how it's going to look like. So let's start with making the banner. If you look at Illustrator, it is very similar to the same setup that Photoshop has. So right here, all of your tools, you have your selection tool, you have your direct selection tool, which allows you to move things like anchor points. You have your pen tool. You have your rectangle tool, which houses other type of shapes that you can create. You have your paintbrush tool, your text, your gradient tool. So I'm going to start with my rectangle tool. So I'm going to click on it on the canvas and this is going to show up. Now the rectangle I want it to have a width of 520 and a height of 58. And I'm going to say, okay. Now my rectangle showed up. I'm going to go and click my selection tool in order to be able to move it to the center. So I have my first rectangle. So now it tells me to look at the white squares that are right here. And I am going to click on that top one, and that is the fill color of my rectangle. And it gives me a color, gives me an RGB color. So it tells me for R, it was 169, for G, it's 122, and for B is 181. Now I'm gonna say okay. And that is going to fill in my rectangle. These colors are just temporary. You can change them later. For right now, these are the colors I'm going to be using to show you how does RGB colors work and to also show you how to use them. So I have my first rectangle. Now it tells me to make a second rectangle. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to click on my rectangle tool. And I'm just going to click somewhere on my canvas. And I want it to have a width of 130 and a height of 58. So I'm going to say, okay. So that just made my second rectangle. But it also tells me to change the color. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here and change the colors. So the R is 123, the G is 69, and the B is 155. And I'm going to say, okay. That just made my triangle darker. So I'm going to go back to my activity prompt and I'm going to look. It tells me to position the second rectangle so that it intersects with the right triangle through the middle. So I'm going to go and hit my selection tool. And I am going to move it. So you know that you've done it when it's intersecting. So it's right on the edge right here and right on the edge right here. So I'm going to click on it. And it tells me, right click on the rectangle. A screen will pop up, click on arrange, and hit send to back. So I'm going to say send to back. So now they're intersecting. Next, it tells me to go to my pen tool, and it wants me to make an anchor point. So in order to make an anchor point, I'm going to look at to where I want my anchor point to be. And I can see in my activity prompt that it tells me that my anchor point needs to be in the middle of these 2 points. So I'm going to go right here where they intersect, and I'm going to put in an anchor point. Now, I am going to take the direct selection tool, which is this one right here, and I'm going to move that anchor point in. And that just made a little triangle banner. So that is what your direct selection tool does. It allows you to move anchor points in or out in order to make different shapes. So I'm going to look at my next direction. I'm on step F, and it says hold shift and right and click on both rectangles. So I'm going to click off, I'm going to click shift, and I'm going to click on both of them. Then you're going to hit Control C, Control F. And then it tells me to look on the right side of my screen and find my Pathfinder tool, which is right here. And I am going to look for intersect. Intersect. And as you can see, a new little triangle or rectangle was selected. So now that I have that little selected rectangle, it's going to tell me to change the color to it. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to click on my fill color and I'm going to change the RGB color. So the top one is going to be 89. The G is going to be 39 and the B is going to be 112. Now I'm going to hit OK. So that just made that rectangle the darkest one. So then it tells me to select the direct selection tool and select the following anchor point for the third rectangle on the bottom right. Then it tells me to drag the anchor point down until it meets the bottom right corner. So this is the anchor point that I am trying to move down. Sometimes you will notice that it is very hard to select the anchor point and move it down. When that happens to me, I usually add a new anchor point and select it and move it down. So you can see that one didn't do much. So I'm going to go in. If you hit Control plus, it allows you to zoom in, which is what I want to do because I can't see where my anchor point is. Now I can see it, so now I can move it. So I moved it to meet the bottom right corner. So I'm gonna go back out so we can see the entire banner, what we have so far. So then it tells me to select the darkest shade, right click, arrange, and click send backward. So I did that. So now as you can see, if I click off, now it looks like a banner. But I only have half of my banner done, which means I need to do the other half. So I'm in step I, and I'm going to see what it tells me to do. It tells me to hold shift and click on the darker and darkest rectangles. So I'm going to click shift, and I'm going to click on the darker and the darkest rectangles. And then you're going to say right click, transform, reflect. And we are doing this over the vertical axis, which is already doing that. And press copy. What this is doing is that it's making a replica that I just moved over to the other side. So as you can see, I just copied over my one side of my banner to the other side. So now I have a full banner. Now step 5 and 6 tell you how to make patterns and how to add fonts from external sources. This is up to you if you want to do that. At this point, if this is your banner that you are going to be turning in, feel free to change the colors or take the challenge of making patterns and adding fonts. It is not that hard to do, so I would highly recommend that you at least try to do it. In this tutorial, I'm not going to go through it so that you have the chance of learning how to figure some things out on your own. So the instructions are there. Google is your friend. I'm going to show you the last 2 steps that you need in order to finish the banner. So I need my name. So I'm going to go to my text and I'm going to click in there. And you can see that you can change the font. So I'm going to change my font to something I like. So I'm going to look for a different one, and I really like this one. And I'm going to just write my name. And I don't like how small it is, so I'm going to make it bigger. So I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to make it bigger. So that I do like. But I don't like where it is, so I'm going to move it to the middle of my banner. So I have my banner. Now, step 8 tells me to hold down Shift and select the entire banner. So I've selected my entire banner. Say right click and say group. Now we're going to go to the effects. We're going to select warp, and we are going to say arc. We're going to say okay. And here you can move it down a little bit if you like. You can make it bigger, smaller, up to you. So there's my banner. So the last step would be to save it. So I'm going to go File, Export, Export As, or you can also say Save for Web. I'm going to say JPEG. I'm going to save it in my desktop, and I'm going to say export and say okay. So now if I go to my desktop, I can see that I have my banner as a JPEG, and that's what you should have as well. So once you do this and you have your banner saved in a location that you can find as a JPEG, this is the image that you will be turning into Canvas. That is it for this lesson. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to help. I'll see you in the next lesson.